I believe in expanding democracy, even though we have a bourgeois democracy in the U.S. The only way that one can help to develop the kind of pro-democratic movement that we need is to take advantage of what already exists. So, Cornell attempting to develop this party and running, I can't be opposed to that because I know the kinds of issues that he will in fact raise. He will raise the issues of peace. Um, he will raise issues related to the continued grinding poverty we have in this country. And so, his voice and the issues he will raise, I think, can be a positive contribution to the national discourse that we have to have. Some people criticize him for not running as a Democrat, and that seems to be they don't understand Cornell's politics in terms of where he believes the country is and the complete capture of the Democratic Party by the neoliberal right, finance capital, and so the only way, and we all see, we've been talking about the constrained spaces we have now for democratic discourse. So the only way you deal with that is to try to open it up so that we can try to expand it again a little bit and try to maintain it for as long as we can, because many of us believe, I believe, that the cutting edge of fascism in the U.S. is not just the Trumpians and those elements, as dangerous as they are. To me, the cutting edge of a particular kind of U.S. fascism is, in fact, the elements that control the Democratic Party, neoliberal elements that control the Democrat Party. They are the ones that are developing a particular kind of fascism that people don't even seem to be able to recognize. So I think having Cornell as part of that discourse, part of that conversation, I think will be helpful. I'm not going to endorse anybody yet. I mean, I want to see a vigorous sort of debate. I think the electoral process is one in which radicals can contest if you have no illusions about its limitations,
Right.
because what we're trying to do is get access to the public. So, and to raise the level of visibility on certain issues, to raise and transform consciousness, leading to a more effective organization and opposition. So that's why, and so I have no illusions beyond, no, I have no faith beyond that in this limited thing that they call democracy in the United States. Politics in the U.S. is even more corrupt than I thought. That the Democrat Party is a gangster party, because they are the ones that led the fight against us. They then turned around and led the fight to undermine the Harry Hawkins campaign in 2020, including getting Hawkins thrown off the ballot in a few states. That these people are not committed to democracy at all, that they are moral hypocrites. And that basically, if you're not prepared to get into this thing and fight and have to get down in the mud with some of these folks, then don't even play with it, because these folks are mud fighters and they fight to win.
Dr. Cornel West, thank you for taking time to join us once again on RBN. How you doing, Dr. Cornel West?
Brother, it's always a blessing to be in conversation with both of you all. You don't realize the degree to which you both instruct and inspire me. I
appreciate
leave with
that.
more fire, more insight, more heat, and more light. And that's a beautiful thing in the dialogue. It's like a jazz jam session. You know what I mean? You come in and you start playing notes you didn't know you could play, and leave with your acts playing in a different way. And that's what you all do every time we have conversations, man. And I appreciate it.
And I hope we can light some more fire under you, because you
Lord,
you have a massive task. You have a massive
You scaring Dr. West. You scaring Dr. West a little bit.
I don't
hold on.
You got a massive task.
I love it.
And it's because of this massive task is why we may have some criticisms, and there's things I want to point out on why I think you can be more effective on your messaging.
That's right.
Especially, I know I keep poking you at this because this is like our third time having this conversation about the lesser two evils, and we're gonna get to that here very soon. But first, I just want to ask you generally, because this has been 2 weeks since we talked. How has your experience been? Because I've seen people who will call you your friend saying mean things about you now because of their loyalty to the Democratic Party. you had people who was considered your friend, Bernie Sanders, who now supporting the corrupt neoliberal Joe Biden over his quote unquote friend, Dr. Cornel West. So how's it been ever since you announced, and what has your experience been challenging the system from the outside thus far?
You know, I appreciate the question, but for me, you always go in with a certain sense of humility and a certain sense of tenacity, so that you put on your armor and you know that different kind of lives will come at you, different kind of critiques will come at you, certain kind of bullets will come at you, but you're ready. You are forever ready. You separate the critics from those who are trashing you. Those who are trashing you, you know, well, Wes ain't nothing but a narcissist. He's been a narcissist for the last 55 years. You say, okay, go on and live your life. I'm praying for you. I ain't got time for that. That's a distraction. No, Wes is gonna steal votes from Biden. No, Biden's not head of a plantation. He got ownership. He owns all these votes and things. No, people are making their own choices critically. They're thinking for themselves. And you're there to try to make a case. Why? Because you are so deeply committed. You're trying to push back their suffering. Trying to cast a light on their social misery. So that you do find out certain folks you thought were with you, not with you. Okay, that's fine. You got your own view about these things. Other folks saying, well, you really a right winger, and we probably tied this. I said, oh,
you got right wing DNA now, Dr. Cornel. I don't know if you saw that.
I said, oh Lord, have mercy. But that's been true, you know, for my life the last 50 years, though. It really has. That's been true. It's just more intense now because electoral politics, you know, is such a emaciated space in a declining empire. That's really what it is. It's just hard for people to be open. And when they see somebody who's just trying to be honest and for real, they say, he must be a fake. He got to be a phony. No. Everybody ain't got to be the way you and your friends are. Don't project that on me. Don't project that on me. You know, no.
I played the little intro from brother Baraka over at
my dear brother.
Yeah,
Baraka. I learned so much from that brother, I'm telling you.
Yeah, and it was curious to me. I played the clip because there's part of the clip where he's talking about the Democratic Party being actually the cutting edge of fascism in the United States. And I want to ask you about that because I've seen a lot of interviews of you since you've been kind of sort of on a media tour. Everybody's asking you to come on. And you describe, you know, the Republicans as the neo-fascists and the Joe Biden and the Democrats as neoliberal. And I do want to push back on that because I see, and we've said this on this network many times, the party that is the fascist party is the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is the more effective evil, to quote Brother Glenn Ford.
The great Glenn Ford.
The great, I should say that, yes. The great
absolutely.
Ford. They are the most effective evil. So we see the Democratic Party inflicting austerity with the debt ceiling. We see the Democratic Party marching us to a nuclear war. We see the Democratic Party refusing $15 minimum wage. We see the Democratic Party with censorship. Us in particular, we have been censored a couple of times. So from our point of view, it's the Democratic Party. Now, both parties are fascists. They have the same donor. But it's the Democratic Party, like the Republican Party. This is the dynamic they have. The Republican Party is the one has the biggest mouth.
Right.
But the Democratic Party is the one who gets the job done. We're talking about the 1994 crime bill. We're talking about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We're talking about all these things. The Democratic Party are the party that sort of executes what the Republicans are yelling. So when you describe Joe Biden and the Democratic Party as neoliberal, does that mean you're saying they're not fascists? Is that, I guess that's the best way to ask that question.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that question because, you know, in some ways it is very complicated. There's an analytical level that says, first, what do we mean by fascism? If fascism is the rule of big money, big military, with extravagant nationalism and excessive patriotism that convinces a relatively helpless citizenry, to scapegoat the most vulnerable rather than confront the most powerful, and called for the massive unraveling and undercutting of any rule of law or democratic procedures and processes, then certainly the Republican Party looks more fascist from a domestic point of view, even though the Democratic Party, from the vantage point of Black folk mass incarceration, from the vantage point of the hood, certainly from the vantage point of West Bank, from the vantage point of victims of AFRICOM in Africa, that's the fascist face of neoliberalism. But within the American empire itself, there is still some kind of commitment of the Democratic Party to certain rule of law and certain democratic practices in a selective way. Now, when it comes to you all, you see, y'all are truth tellers and justice seekers tied to a hated people. So that, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. could talk about American democracy, but it was RFK and JFK and Hoover who's keeping track of him every day like he could have been in the Soviet Union, right?
Right.
You see what I mean? Because he's coming from the below American apartheid in the southern part of the states. You see, so that he's exposed to that fascist side of that glib liberal regime, but that glib liberal regime does have certain concerns about rights and liberties that some of the fascists on the Republican side might not. And so I think what you all are saying, tell me if I'm wrong, is that there's varieties of fascism on a spectrum. And from one's own vantage point, if you're looking at it through the lens of Precious, Jamal, and Letitia on the chocolate side of the empire, whose cousin's in mass incarceration, whose sister might be dealing with decrepit education and indecent housing and don't have health care, and the police is terrorizing, then ain't nothing. It looks like fascism to a certain degree, you see. So it depends on what level of analysis we're talking about here. But I do think, and Brother John, Brother Baraka has always pushed this on me, a similar kind of question that you have. I do think that I'm going to have to be a much more sharp and telling in my underside. See, my argument in part also is that Trump is pushing us toward a second civil war and Biden's pushing us toward the third world war.
Right. So the point of view of fascism, are we looking at it internationally, like you're saying, or we're looking at it domestically? But go ahead, Nick, you were going to chime in.
Yeah. There's a lot to break down there. And I would say a lot of the pushback you get is from people not really understanding the term neoliberal, neo-fascist. And I actually think it would be more effective if you said that Biden and Trump is a fascist. But when you say that Biden is a harsh neoliberal, I find that to be a scathing criticism, because I think a lot of people don't understand what neoliberal policies actually bring us. Neoliberal policies leads to fascism. And based on your answer, it seems like you agree. And put back on me if I'm wrong that Joe Biden is accurate to say he's a fascist. And I think your messaging would be more effective if you make it clear that you see both Biden and Trump at the same. Because yes, the Republican Party push a very particular authoritarianism, a very particular fascism, especially against the LGBTQ community, that I find disgusting. But at the same time, when you look at the fascism that the Democratic Party push, whenever someone imply that the Republican fascism is worse, it kind of undermines the struggle and the people who suffered under Democratic Party fascism. It makes it like the people who suffer under the crime bill is less than the people who suffer under the Republican. And that's where the content comes from. And I think that's where they're like, oh, what do you mean he's different? No. When I'm a victim of the crime bill, I'm a victim of the bankruptcy bill, and many people in my community are. So when people say that Trump is better than Biden, you're undermining our show. I don't think you're doing that, but that's the message that appear. And I know I'm ready for it. I want to share this because I really hope that I can, like I said, light a spark in your rhetoric, and I make a lot of Democrats mad with the way I speak about them, but I can back it up, which is why RBN is very inconvenient for them. So
hated. Just say hated. RBN is hated. Just say what you want to say. Go ahead.
And I'll propose this question, and Dr. West, feel free to push back at me anytime. I'll propose this question for people who believe that Trump is worse than Biden. What is the thing that pushed Trump over the edge that made him worse than the average oligarch? A lot of people will tell you it's his border policies, his messaging on the border, how he literally implemented fascism on the border, which led AOC to do photo ops crying on the border, for example. Like that what a lot of people considered what pushed him over the edge, what made him worse. Remember when he said we need to send Mexicans back to their country? Like that was it, right?
So we call them rapists and criminals. You see, that's what I mean by scapegoating precious human beings and demonizing them in that way.
Yeah, and the argument I made is the Democratic Party did the exact same thing. Like there's clips and video clips of Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, they all saying the same thing. They just do it in a more intelligent way. So this is a few headlines that show that Biden implementing the same level of domestic fascism as well of international fascism. The ICE and Biden administration was encouraging forced labor. This is under the Biden administration. This is the kind of stuff that made people call Trump a fascist. And then I'm gonna go through these really quick. Immigrant activists decry Biden's crackdown on illegal border crossing. And here's a receipt that a lot of people like AOC and Bernie Sanders who endorse Joe Biden need to reconcile with, or they will continue to lose their entire credibility. Because Donald Trump was a fascist because of the way he implemented ICE. Joe Biden ICE is responsible for human slave labor, sexual violations, and massive corruption. And on top of that, Joe Biden is funding DHS and ICE way more than Donald Trump. He's proposing the largest budget in the DHS history, the largest budget in ICE history. So, Dr. Cornel West, when we tell people that Joe Biden is the largest fascist, we are not being dumb. We are not being dishonest. We are not just saying it to elicit a reaction. Now, we can go on foreign policy all day, but I'll cut myself short. Just another example. Cuba says Biden applies the blockade even more aggressively than his predecessors. So and I can go all day with this. I'll cut it off right here. So when we say this, I am trying to let people know we are not being hyperbolic. When we say the Democratic Party is just as fascist as the Republican Party, and many argue is more. So, Dr. Cornel West, anything you want to add? Anything you want to put back on as well?
Now, let me ask you this question, though, because you all making a strong case here. That, I mean, when it comes to the precious rights of our sisters of all colors, reproductive rights, you do have a difference there. And you all already acknowledge that in terms of perceptions of various gay brothers, lesbian sisters, and so forth. Now, it's within a liberal rule of law, but it's still within the lived experience of precious folk. Well, one supports the rights and the other does not in terms of reproductive rights. I think same would be true, though, in terms of the strategies of the corporate elites and the ruling classes of the American empire to use issues of diversity and equity and inclusion lead toward a public perception that the Democratic Party is more concerned about voting rights, more concerned about liberties, whereas the Republican Party is very explicit. They've been explicitly white supremacists. Voting rights, they don't give a dang. And when it comes to gerrymandering vis-a-vis black votes, Voting Rights Act of John Lewis, they're against across the board. And those are the ways in which the misperceptions of the masses can view the Democratic Party as being more liberal and the Republican Party more fascist. Now, what you all point out is non-negotiable, is unequivocal. These are facts. And these facts show the fascist dimension of Biden and the Democratic Party and the neoliberal administration. But you also have to come to terms with why so many have the perception that the Democratic Party does have this flexibility that the Republican Party doesn't, if we're going to make the claim that both of them are in their distinctive ways fascist. What would you all say back to that formulation?
I could speak to that, and that's because the Democratic Party's best selling point is virtue signaling. That's the answer. So they understand that just simply saying it makes them different, even if they're not going to execute it. And follow me with this analogy. If I say I'm for Medicare for all, and Nick says, I'm against Medicare for all. So he's representing the Democratic side. The Republican side. He's no to Medicare for all. And I'm like, yeah, Medicare for all. But I tell you, the way I'm going to get Medicare for all is rubbing two sticks together. What's the final result? What is the tangible result? Aren't we both pushing the same thing? You see, I'm speaking, but I'm trying to rub two sticks together to get you something. Am I really trying? Did they really try to stop the taking away of the rights of abortion rights? Did they really try? Because that was a 50-year plan that they executed right in front of their eyes as they're eating popcorn.
And they had time for a national.
Exactly. Obama could have codified it. Obama could have codified it, and he said he was going to do so. To answer what you're saying, it is the cornerstone of Democratic propaganda is virtue signaling. Say that you want it. I mean, Nancy Pelosi went out to when George Floyd was murdered. She was wearing the African cloths, acting like she was down with us when we know they're not. They didn't do anything. So it's the dance that this uniparty play. It's the dance of I'm gonna pretend like I'm the good cop and you're the bad cop when they have the same destination. That's all this is. And we are here, RBN, I believe Black Power Media too. We're here to take that mask off of the Democratic Party and say, look, they're twins. These are identical twins in two different disguises. So could you do you feel like that's a rebuttal or an answer to what you're saying?
There, I think, my two dear brothers, you all help me on this, is that we still have to explain how it is that the neoliberal strands of the labor movement, for example, the neoliberal strands of the Black community make a decision to go with the Democratic Party, tied to virtue signaling, as you say, but also tied to distinguishing themselves against. It's because the Republican Party is so radically anti-trade union, whereas the Democratic Party, give them a little bit here, little bit there, but when the class struggle emerges with the railroad strike, they let you know whose side they on now. They're gonna let you know, but they're gonna give you enough concessions and crumbs for the AFL-CIO to come out, for Biden and so forth.
That was
whereas
terrible.
The Republicans are just so explicitly anti-labor. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I can respond to that because there's nothing wrong with speaking truth to power and speaking about all the horrible things that the Republicans do. But I think for narrative purpose-wise, especially for people who build a third-party movement, as CJ described, as it seemed like you'd agree, they work together to create this strife. So the Republican Party scaled back reproductive rights, but the Democratic Party essentially helped them to do it because capitalism thrives under chaos. Capitalism thrives when culture war is placed front and center. And narrative speaking wise, it's best for us to explain people that. Yes, we can talk about the evils of the Republican Party, but we explain that the Democrats are complicit with that. When Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden helped Mitch McConnell put judges on the board, like they're complicit with these things, and that message is effective on both casting a shade on the Republican Party and also showing how the Democratic Party is correct with the Republicans. And I live in the red state. I talk to a lot of conservative-minded people as well, and the rhetoric against the Republicans is very useful to bringing them on our side. But when you're talking to an overall populace, it's very important to paint both parties as having the same overall goal of subjugating the workers. So I will point out Trump fascism and Trump authoritarian. I do it on the show all the time just to rub it in right-wingers' face who think he's on their side. But our overall message should always be that both parties have the same overall goal. So when you call the Republican Party, you're 100% accurate, but we got to make sure that our intensity, our fire is exactly on the Democratic Party as well. I'll pass to CJ and Dr. West.
There's
another topic I want to get to because I think you have a great strategy again to Trump country.
Yeah, but it's just two things. The Trump country thing, I think, if you use neo-fascism to describe Biden in Trump country, you're going to be a lot more successful because you can't go to Trump country and say Trump is this bad and Biden is this bad. Then it's a harder selling point. It's an equal. Then they'll be able to listen to you.